Let's continue now with the Bhagavad Gita. So now, remember the last time Arjuna should not grieve because you cannot slay nor be slain. And then he says, considering your dharma, Krishna says, you should not vacillate. You should not be waving back and forth. You should have clear decision making as to what you ought to do and what is correct. If you do not, then you lack wisdom. And then he says, the story of your dishonor will be repeated endlessly, and for a man of honor, dishonor is worse than death. So here it is, another argument. Not only do you should know this, not only should you be called a coward, now the dishonor that will come upon you will be awful. And then now Krishna is going to proceed and begin to open up the concept of yoga. The principles of yoga, by practicing this, you can break through the bonds of karma. So this is the three marga and the three different conceptions of yoga that we're going to deal with that are spoken of. And what he needs to develop, what Arjuna needs to develop, is singleness of purpose. Now keep this in mind. This is universal to all human beings. Everybody should develop this wisdom. Everybody should come to the same understanding. Everybody should attain enlightenment. So this is not just for Arjuna. This is archetypal of all human beings. For those who lack resolution, the decisions of life are many, bunch, and endless. So that you have, if you don't have wisdom, you will be tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. You will be confused, perplexed. Life will become more and more unclear, and you will end up in greater ignorance and in a worse reincarnation, of course. There are ignorant people. Those whose minds are swept away by the pursuit of pleasure and power are incapable of following the supreme goal and will not attain samadhi. Samadhi is another expression is a Hindu expression for liberation or nirvana or enlightenment. He says he is going to teach him a concept, an idea that is difficult for us to grasp because it is contrary to the way human behavior, human action is. As a human being, I expect that the actions that I endeavor have consequences and that those consequences will be good. So I do actions expecting certain outcomes and thinking that those actions will benefit me and others. But here what you have is you have the right to work, but never to the fruit of work. So that's a bit perplexing, especially for us who are in a meritocracy and constantly engaged in trying to increase our profits and rise up in the ladder and so on. You should never engage in action for the sake of reward, nor should long for inaction. So you have to have action without attachment to the fruits of action. That means Arjuna is not killing these people so that he can gain honor and he can restore a kingdom. You're not fighting for a kingdom, Arjuna. You're not fighting for honor. You need to fight because it is your obligation, not because it is good or bad, but because it is your obligation, and you should have no regard of the consequences from that. And then he brings up this concept of yoga. It says, for yoga is, now that's a straightforward definition, and it says for yoga is perfect evenness of mind. And that's exactly what you should have in mind when you speak of yoga. Yoga is a way of training the body to be able to stand in a position, not be disturbed by sounds or weather or temperature changes or anything like that. You meditate, you teach your mind to be able to be single-minded, and it develops in you this perfect evenness of mind. Now, when you sit down and meditate, or you see a person meditating, and they do that for half an hour, that is a practice for what should be your ordinary life. Your life should be one of serenity, one of bliss, one of wisdom, where you're not conflated, you're not confused, you don't find yourself torn in between different parties and different interests. You always know the right answer, and you're acting in accordance to wisdom, and therefore you don't have to waver in that. So that is an example. Yoga is a glimpse into what life should be. Therefore, devote yourself to the disciplines of yoga, for yoga is skill in action. So yoga is a way of life. It's pretty much a basic attitude towards the world. When your mind has overcome the confusion of duality, good and bad, death, alive, just as injustice, you will attain the state of holy indifference to things you heard or things you have heard. So now that you have this other teaching, which is you ought to become, in a sense, indifferent to it, you overcome the duality, but you do not become cynical, you do not become a nihilist. It's not just throwing your hands up and saying, screw this, there is no point to it, who cares? It's not indifference in that sense. It is an indifference that comes out of recognizing that it is worthless and meaningless. So that is a challenge that is to be had in this context. So there you have, the mind is to overcome these dualities, and you will attain samadhi or moksha, which is the state of perfect reflection in yoga. So let's continue with this. There are a few other insights that we need to bring to bear, and I will go over the notes with you in the last 5 minutes. So what you have here is use all your power to free the senses from the attachment of aversion alike and live in the full wisdom of the self. That which the world calls day is the night of ignorance to the wise. And so here you have a contrast between ordinary consciousness and enlightened consciousness. They are forever free who renounce all selfish desires and break away from the ego cage of I, me, and mine. So personal, individual existence, personal possessions. To be united with the Lord, this is the supreme state. Attain to this and pass from death to immortality. So let me go ahead and explain to you what the notes that you have here on your Prezi. There are the three marga, which is the three paths, and there is knowledge, which is discriminative wisdom, eternity of the true self. In Hinduism, if you were to identify evil is ignorance. It's Maya, M-A-Y-A. It's Maya, it's illusion. It's failure to understand the nature of reality. That's what evil is, and we discussed that in the account in Genesis 2. It is a failure to understand the true nature of reality, and therefore the only way in which you can be liberated from this is by attaining the right knowledge. So knowledge is the key to understanding, is the key to life. And then you have action, and action is going to have a few components to it. Of course, it is yoga, and your entire life should be yoga. Over and against the multiplicity of sense experience and ordinary awareness, the world of multiplicity. So whether you're feeling tired is irrelevant, whether you're happy is irrelevant, whether you're rested is irrelevant. Just keep the steadiness of mind. Whether you won the lottery, that doesn't make you any happier than you would otherwise. It doesn't add to your already consistent understanding. Adding more wealth to your life does not add understanding. And here is you have to overcome those things that we see as desirable. Unattached action, to act without the purpose of the fruits of action. You have to be indifferent about the consequences of it, which of course is antithetical to the way we think, as I mentioned before. And the purpose, duty should supersede the outcome. So even if your outcome is going to bring about death and destruction, it is your obligation to carry it out. It is the will of the gods, and therefore you should submit to that. And then what you have here is a form of yoga, which is what's called the so one is this one is called Bhakti Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga has to do with a yoga of surrender out of love for Brahman, and that is this is more in tune with passions and desires. And I mentioned before this idea of the three yogas. That is what's called Karma Yoga. Karma, just like it's ordinarily spelled. Karma Yoga has to do with the yoga of action. And then you have Bhakti Yoga, which is the one of devotions. And then, let me see, somehow the third one is escaping my mind right now, which is Jnana Yoga. I'm sorry. And Jnana Yoga is the one of knowledge. So those are the three forms of knowledge you need to yoga that you need to engage in. So the lessons that Arjuna is having to perceive in this are quite profound. He needs to transcend ordinary reality. So what you're going to have is Arjuna is going to go and engage in his conflict, and he is going to trust in the power of meditation. He is going to understand the wisdom of the Vedas. He is going to connect with the which represents the changelessness of Brahman. So all of these ideas, I'm just kind of reading them through as I go through my notes on the book, which is there's just so much in this book that will give you a sense of what Hinduism. The same truths are repeated time and time and time and time again, so that they become ingrained in your mind. It's a way of it's a heuristic for understanding, and that is repetition in many different ways, the same idea until you finally get it. So at the end of the conflict, the way in which it comes to final realization is when Krishna is going to reveal itself, Vishnu is going to reveal itself through Krishna. And this is going to be a direct vision of ultimate reality. And this is what is going to completely silence what Arjuna's objections are. And notice what Arjuna says when he contemplates it, when he sees this. He says, through your words, Krishna, my delusion is gone. And he says, just as you have described your infinite glory, O Lord, now I long to see it. So he wants to have this, what's called beatific vision, this non-cognitive, not a matter of true and false, non-cognitive and non-explainable, non-articulable, direct perception of ultimate reality. And that is what you can consider enlightenment or so. And so Sanjaya is going to describe this magnificent look that Arjuna takes into Krishna. And this is what happens. Having spoken, this is Sanjaya, these words, Krishna, the master of yoga, notice what he became, revealed to Arjuna his most exalted lordly form. So Krishna is going to show him Vishnu, which ultimately is going to show Brahman. He appeared in infinite number of faces, remember, infinitude of knowledge, ornamented by heavenly jewels, displaying unending miracles and countless weapons of his power. So what you have here is Krishna is kind of going to open its mouth, and when Arjuna looks into the mouth of it, he's going to see a cosmic vision of the entirety of all things. Clothed in celestial garments and covered with garlands sweet smelling with heavenly fragrances, he showed himself as the infinite Lord, the source of all the wonders. Remember the creative power, whose face is everywhere. If 1,000 suns were to rise in the heavens at the same time, the blaze of the light will resemble the splendor of that Supreme Spirit. That should give you a sense of the fullness of it. There within the body of the God of gods, Arjuna saw all the manifold forms of the universe united as one. So there you have. Arjuna contemplated and saw ultimate reality as ultimately comprised of not a multiplicity of changes and events and peoples and ideas, but as one. And so this is his response ultimately. He says, how could they not worship you, O Lord? Notice, this was the one that was confounded, could not fight, did not make sense. Now he's totally brought to submission and repentance. You are the eternal Spirit who existed before Brahma, the Creator, and who will never cease to be Lord of the gods. You are abode of the universe, chainless. You are what is and what is not, and beyond the duality of existence and non-existence. Again, this constant push against the ordinary way of using reason and trying to transcend that by speaking of going beyond ordinary rationality. Then he says, Krishna says, Arjuna, though my grace you have been united, through my grace you have been united with me and received this vision of my radiant universal form without beginning or end, which no one else has ever seen. Not by knowledge of the Vedas, not by sacrifices, nor charity, nor rituals. Remember the entire Vedas and everything that was there before? He says, no, that is not the path to wisdom. Not even by severe asceticism. Asceticism when you denial of the senses, food and all.